October 2020, 11. 1a. Choose any two of the following passages from the Quran, and briefly describe the main themes in each passage. 4. 1b. Briefly explain the importance of these themes in a Muslim's life today. 4. A. Themes. 1. 2:255. Theme of this long verse of a Medinian surah, Al-Baqarah, is Tawhid. It outlines God's inimitable attributes that distinguish him from his creatures. The words Al-Hayyu Al-Qayyum, the ever-living and self-subsisting, refer to his creative and sustaining. 1b. Briefly explain the importance of these themes in a Muslim's life today. 4. A. Themes. 1. 2:255. Theme of this long verse of a Medinian surah, Al-Baqarah, is Tawhid. It outlines God's inimitable attributes that distinguish him from his creatures. The words Al-Hayyu Al-Qayyum, the ever-living and self-subsisting, refer to his creative and sustaining force behind his existence. God is free from human weaknesses and needs such as tiredness or sleep. His authority encompasses the entire universe, and he remains totally uninfluenced in establishing his writ over his created world. The word kursi signifies both his authority and knowledge about all his domain because he is its sole creator. Therefore, none of his creations can escape his knowledge in the remotest parts of the universe. It further emphasizes God's unique right of exercising his authority to the extent that no one can intercede or plead for anyone else unless he himself grants permission for that. The passage ends with the words Huwal Aliyyu al-Azim that represent his ultimate supremacy and exaltedness. The Quran repetitively mentions God's supreme status, such as, God be exalted, the true King, the Lord of the Throne of Grace, 23:116, Al-Mu'minun. 2, 96:1-5. These 5 verses of Surah Iqra al-Alaq are the first ever revelation that the Prophet received in the cave Hira in Ramadan 610 AD. The remaining 6 verses were revealed later when the Prophet began to offer regular prayer in the precincts of the Kaaba. The command of read in the name of your Lord in the first verse means the Prophet was already familiar with one supreme God. The word alaq was traditionally translated as a clot of congealed blood. In modern times it refers to the primary state of embryo. The next verses mention God's power to create humans from a humble origin and mature them to acquire worldly knowledge by using the pen. The ability to read and write shaped human intellectual evolution over the ages. The last verse points to God's will to grant humans spiritual knowledge through divine revelation as and when it was required for humans. 3. Surah 114. This is the last surah of the Quran revealed together with Surah 113. Both are called Al-Mu'awwizatan, the two protectors. Some traditions declare them to be the Makkan surahs, but relatively stronger sources prove them to be Madniyan. Both teach Muslims not to have any fears of the supernatural and the unknown, the internal and external evils that may affect them. Surah 113 mentions God's protection from the visible evils. This surah, on the other hand, reassures Muslims of God's powers to protect them against the invisible or internal evil forces. Repetition of God's attributes in the first 3 verses implies God's special bond with humans. The remaining verses warn against Satan and mention his method of enticing humans. For this reason, the Quran repeatedly declares, "Verily Satan is an avowed enemy to man." 12:5, Yusuf. B. Importance of the themes. 1. 2:255. The passage strengthens the belief of the Muslims in Tawhid in terms of God's oneness, uniqueness, majesty, and glory. It also crystallizes the belief of Tawhid and trains them to condemn shirk as humans are vulnerable to go astray under the influence of Satan. There is repetitive mention of God's authority, unlimited knowledge and powers in order to instruct them to worship and depend on God alone. The message of this verse frees the believers from fear of all other powers, visible and invisible. By believing in God's absolute powers, Muslims tend to develop his fear, as is commanded in another verse, O you who believe. Fear God as he should be feared. 3:102, Ali Imran. At the same time, this verse inculcates a sense of accountability in his court. Muslims usually recite this verse as an invocation for protection of their lives and belongings. The Prophet is reported to have said, "Whoever recited Ayat al-Kursi after every obligatory prayer, nothing prevents him from entering paradise except death." Therefore, Muslims recite the Ayat al-Kursi while leaving their valuables at or outside home. 2:96:1-5. These verses teach Muslims to acknowledge God's favors of creating humans from a low origin and then making them distinct from all other creatures by way of gaining knowledge. The gift of knowledge is so supreme that God commanded the angels to bow down before Adam because he was made superior due to the knowledge granted to him by God. The Quran states, "And he taught Adam the names of all things." 2:31-34, Al-Baqarah, according to many ahadith, pen was among the first ever creations of God. That is why Surah 68, Al-Kalam, begins with God vowing the pen. The Quran, at another place, endorses the superiority of humans in these words, "We have indeed created man in the best of molds." 95:4, Al-Tin. They need to remember that God alone blessed them in multiple ways, and so, they need to worship and be grateful to him. The verses highlight the importance of acquiring knowledge in order to keep their superior status. 3. Surah 114. This first word, Qul say, requires Muslims to be obedient to God, as that is the only way to seek his refuge against evil. A genuine obedience removes any arrogance towards God or a false belief of having control over their destinies. Once, the Prophet was riding a mule along with a companion. When the mule stumbled, the companion said, "May Satan perish." The Prophet said, "Do not say that. It encourages Satan," and he says, "I knocked with my strength." But if you say, "In the name of God," Satan is dwarfed and becomes like a fly. This means the remembrance of God guarantees defeat of Satan. The surah tells Muslims to beware of Satan injecting evil thoughts in their hearts. Therefore, they follow the Prophet's tradition by reciting the last two surahs regularly before going to bed. Regular recitation of the last two surahs acts as an antidote against all satanic forces, however stronger they might be. This is because of the fact that God has ultimate control over all forces. 2a. Using passages from the syllabus, write about what God says about his relationship with two of his messengers. 10b. How might Muslims use the Quran to have a closer connection with God? 4. A. Satan eventually enticed Hazrat Adam and Eve to disobey God by approaching the forbidden tree in paradise. Hazrat Adam and Eve, however, repented on their mistake before God, who had taught. The set passages mention some details of God's relationship with Hazrat Adam, Hazrat Ibrahim, Hazrat Isa. Set passages mention some details of God's relationship with Hazrat Adam, Hazrat Ibrahim, Hazrat Isa and the Holy Prophet Muhammad. According to 2:30-37, God granted Hazrat Adam the status of his vicegerent by bestowing on him the ability of acquiring knowledge and creative thinking. This enabled him to name the things, nomenclature, that had not been given to any other creature. Surah 96, Al-Alaq, states the same quality granted to humans as, "He who taught by the pen." 96:4, this exalted status of Hazrat Adam was acknowledged as all angels were commanded to prostrate before him. Iblis, a jinn and not an angel, disobeyed God and was banished. Along with knowledge and wisdom, Hazrat Adam was also granted free will. He was tested by God, who awarded him a blissful life in paradise but with a restriction of not approaching the forbidden tree. Regarding this, God warned Hazrat Adam to beware of the unholy mission of Satan, who would try to distract Hazrat Adam from obedience to God. Satan eventually enticed Hazrat Adam and Eve to disobey God by approaching the forbidden tree in paradise. Hazrat Adam and Eve, however, repented on their mistake before God, who had taught him the ways to seek forgiveness. Thus, Hazrat Adam learned about God's wisdom, powers, mercy, and forgiveness. Finally, both Hazrat Adam and his wife were sent down on the earth with the mission of acting as God's vicegerent. The word Khalifa is usually translated as vicegerent or deputy. Its deeper meaning is a trustee, the one who has been assigned a mission by God. This means Hazrat Adam was entrusted with the divine mission of guiding his descendants to do the good and avoid the evil. Thus it means that humans should not make an outright claim of ownership of the earth but should consider themselves a conditional trustee of their Lord on it. Like Hazrat Adam, they too will be tested, as Satan has been given a lease of life to misguide humans till the day of judgment. They should, however, remember the acceptance of Tawbah, repentance of Hazrat Adam before God, who is oft forgiving. The Prophet Muhammad was consoled by God at many critical moments so that he could realize the ultimate powers of God against the pagans of Makkah. Surah 93, Al-Duha, was revealed in the early Makkan period. It was revealed after a prolonged break in revelation, Fatra al-Wahy. During this interval, the pagans ridiculed the Prophet by saying, "Your God has forgotten about you." The Prophet was quite worried over this, and began to think that he had perhaps displeased God. Amidst these circumstances, God reassured his special support for the Prophet, and promised him future success. He explained the wisdom of the interval between revelations by referring to the contrast of bright morning light and the darkness of night. The morning light means the coming of revelation, and the darkness implies the break in revelation that gave the Prophet some rest. Moreover, God promised him success in future, just as he promised the same in some other verses. For example, Surah 94, Al-Inshirah, declares, "Verily with every difficulty there is relief." However, God instructed him to show kindness towards the orphans and the needy people around him. Future victories of the Prophet reaffirmed his knowledge about God's special favors on him. Similarly, God consoled the Holy Prophet when he was mocked by the Makkans on the death of his second son, Abdullah, from Hazrat Khadijah. On hearing this, his uncle Abu Lahab came out of his house saying, "Batara Muhammadan," that means Muhammad has been cut off, of future hope. Other pagans also began to mock him. The Prophet then received this surah that gave him the glad tiding of their abundance. The word abundance carries multiple meanings that include the moral qualities of the Prophet, his followers, the prophethood, the Quran, his knowledge and wisdom. It also refers to a specially blessed river in paradise that is exclusively reserved for him. He was also promised the destruction of his insulters on the condition of establishing regular prayer and being ready for any sacrifice in the way of God. According to the Muslim belief, the Quran is the word of God, so it acts as a connection with God. It contains guidance from God, so it lets them know what God wants and expects from them. They can converse with God by reciting it, and then comprehending its teachings. The Quran tells them the right path to follow in order to get closer to God. Many Quranic verses are used as supplication by Muslims. For example, the most frequently recited verse as supplication is, "O our Lord, give us the good in this world and the good in the hereafter, and save us from the torment of the fire." 2:201, Al-Baqarah. Similarly, a Hafiz memorizer of the Quran develops a sense of closeness to God with the Quran in his heart. Finally, those who teach Quran to others also remember God by repeatedly reciting it. 3a. The Prophet, Pu, conquered Makkah in 630. b. Why was it important for the Prophet to offer refuge to the Makkans? Prophet, Pu, conquered Makkah in 630. Write an account of the main events of the conquest. 10. b. Why was it important for the Prophet to offer refuge to the Makkans? 4. A. The Quraysh helplessly watched the growth of Islam after the Truce of Al-Hudaybiyah. Encouraged by the defeat of Muslims in the Battle of Mu'tah, September 629 AD 8 AH, they incited their ally Banu Bakr to attack Banu Quza, who were the ally of Muslims. The Makkan chiefs who provided them weapons included Ikrimah bin Abu Jahl, Safwan bin Umayyah, Sohail bin Amr and others. Consequently, several men of Banu Bakr attacked Banu Quza at night when they were asleep. Banu Quza sought shelter in the Kaaba, but the chief of Banu Bakr, Nawfal, commanded them to continue their mission. Thus, many innocent people of Banu Quza were unjustly killed. The matter was reported to the Prophet by the chief of Banu Quza, Amr bin Salim, who had rushed to Medina with his 40 men. The Prophet, according to the customs of justice, demanded the Quraysh to pay the blood money, diyar, to Banu Quza or break their alliance with that tribe or dissolve the truce. The first two options went against the prestige and tradition of the Quraysh. Carter bin Umar on behalf of the Quraysh that only the last condition would be acceptable. However, they realized their mistake and sent Abu Sufyan to Medina to settle the issue. Abu Sufyan first went to the Prophet and requested him to renew the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. The Prophet gave no reply. He met his daughter, Ramla Habiba, one of the wives of the Prophet, but she refused to help him. He then asked Hazrat Abu Bakr and Hazrat Umar to intercede, but they too refused. He approached Hazrat Fatima, who was sitting with her son Hazrat Hassan, and tried to emotionally pressurize her by way of Hazrat Hassan. She too could not give any reassurance to him. Finally, at the insistence of Hazrat Ali, he came to the Prophet's mosque and announced that he had renewed the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. The Prophet was fully determined to take decisive action against the Quraysh. He made secret preparations to attack Makkah and raised a huge army of about 10,000 as many Bedouin tribes joined him on his way to Makkah. In January 630, he marched towards Makkah and camped at the hills of Mar al-Zaran in the outskirts of Makkah. There, at night, he ordered his troops to light torches. This was a clever military tactic as the size of the army looked magnified when the Makkans looked at it from a distance. They abandoned any hope of resisting the Muslims. Abu Sufyan, perhaps on spying mission, was captured and taken to the Prophet and embraced Islam. Next morning the Prophet divided his army into 4 columns and placed each column under a capable commander, one under himself, one under Abu Ubaid, one under Khalid bin Walid and one given to Asad bin Ubadah. He strictly forbade use of arms unless the Makkans attacked. He declared 3 places of safety for every Makkan, one's own house, Abu Sufyan's house and the Kaaba. The army entered Makkah unresisted except for Khalid's column. Attack on his column led to death of 2 Muslims and 13 Makkans. The Prophet performed tawaf of the Kaaba, went inside to pray and then destroyed 360 idols and other paintings and images. He was assisted by Ali in smashing idols, and recited this, and say the truth has prevailed and falsehood perished, for surely falsehood is bound to perish. 17 hours 81 minutes, Al-Isra. He came out to address the Quraysh in the compound. He said, O people of Quraysh, God has abolished the haughtiness of the Jahiliyyah and its veneration of ancestors. People all sprang from Adam and Adam came from dust. Then he recited, O mankind, we have created you from a single pair of a male and a female. The most honored of you in the sight of God is he who is the most righteous of you. 49:13 Al-Hujurat. The Prophet then delivered a sermon about fundamentals of Islam from the Safa hill and asked the Quraysh what they expected from him. They replied, You are a noble brother and a son of a noble brother. The Prophet stunned them by saying, No blame on you be this day. Go, you are free. Thus a general pardon was declared for all except about 10 blasphemous men. They included Habba bin Aswad, Mikyas Sababa Lathai, Huwairith bin Nukaid, Abdullah Hilal, Abdullah bin Qatal and some others including 4 women. However, according to many sources only 4 of them were executed. Almost whole of Makkah submitted to the fold of Islam including the worst enemies like Ikrimah bin Abu Jahl, Washai bin Hob, Hamza's killer, and hind wife of Abu Sufyan. The Prophet stayed in Makkah for about 20 days to make arrangements for its administration. He redefined the boundaries of the Haram-i Kaaba by erecting pillars. Most of the offices of the Quraysh were abolished except for the Sakaya, serving water to pilgrims, that was given back to Al-Abbas, and the key of the Kaaba returned to Uthman bin Talha of Banu Abd Dar. B. The Prophet knew how to rule the hearts of his worst enemies. He never bred grudge against any of his insulators. His declaration of general pardon for all Makkans surprised his enemies, and it became apparent to all that his struggle was only in the way of God. As a result, most of them embraced Islam, and many emerged as capable commanders in later years. The Prophet did not want any unnecessary bloodshed in the precincts of the holy Kaaba, and so, only some of the pagans were executed. Thus he demonstrated an important aspect of the code of conduct of war in Islam. He also wanted to set the noble example of generosity of heart as taught by the Quran. The recompense for an injury is an injury equal thereto, but if a person forgives and makes reconciliation, his reward is due from God. 42:40, Al-Shura. 4a. Choose 3 events from the Prophet's life that demonstrate his moral character, and write in detail about them. 10b. Which of these events do you think is the most relevant as a lesson for Muslims today? 4. A. The Prophet has been described by the Quran as, "And you, O Muhammad, are truly a man of outstanding character." 68:4, Al-Kalam. He set several examples of nobility of conduct and high degree of morality. Some of these qualities include his kindness, mercy, truthfulness, and trustworthiness. Kindness. At the time of the persecutions in Mecca, he was insulted by pagans in a variety of ways. Once Abu Jahl and Uqba bin Abi Mu'ayt tried to strangle him by twisting a sheet around his neck. He did not curse them at all, and was finally rescued by Hazrat Abu Bakr. Similarly, Jamil, wife of Abu Lahab, used to throw the entrails of goat or sheep when the Prophet was prostrating during his prayer. He would quietly finish his prayer and say nothing to her. He instructed his followers to be kind to others, including their enemies. Once he spotted a young orphan boy crying on the Eid day. The Prophet consoled him by saying, "Would you not like Muhammad to be your father and Aisha be your mother?" After his victory in Badr, he treated all the 70 captives with kindness. None of them was forced to embrace Islam. They were offered soft terms of ransom. Merciful. The Prophet demonstrated mercy and forgiveness on several occasions. When he went to preach Islam to the people of Taif, they rejected him and chased him away, throwing stones at him, causing him to bleed. When the angel Jibril came and said God had given permission to destroy the people of Taif by crushing them between 2 mountains if he so desired, the prophets replied that he would rather have someone from their community believe in and worship one God. He prayed for their guidance to the right path. He surprised all by declaring general amnesty for his worst enemies on his conquest of Mecca. He instructed his followers, "Be compassionate to those on the earth, and he who is in the heavens will be compassionate to you." Trustworthy. The Makkans knew of the Prophet's trustworthiness and called him Al-Amin even before his formal declaration of his prophethood. They continued to entrust their belongings with him after he started preaching Islam. They knew that he was a thoroughly trustworthy man. His marriage with Hazrat Khadija was partly a result of his utmost degree of honesty and trustworthiness. He expanded her business in a fair way, and this impressed her a lot. He was worried about the belongings of his pagan enemies even on the night before his Hijra journey for Medina. He asked Hazrat Ali to sleep in his bed and return the belongings to their owners. Truthful. He was known to the Quraysh as Al-Sadiq because of his honesty and truthfulness. After the start of his prophetic mission, though they rejected his message, they still believed in his upright conduct and truthfulness. The Prophet asked the Makkans from the Mount Safa, would they believe in him if he told there was a huge army ready to attack from the other side of the hill? The Quraysh unanimously declared that they had never heard him tell a lie. In 7 AH, when the Prophet's envoy took the message of Islam to the court of the Roman Emperor, Abu Sufyan was also there. The emperor asked Abu Sufyan about the conduct of the Prophet. Though an enemy of Islam at that time, Abu Sufyan testified to the truthfulness of the Prophet. Humble. The Prophet behaved in humble way throughout his life. Both in Mecca and Medina, he lived a simple life, though in Medina several companions and his wives were always eager to assist him in daily chores of life. He used to mend his clothes and shoes, clean his house and milk his goats himself. He encouraged others to do the same by saying, one who works for himself is a friend of God. His food, garments, and bed were unusually simple, and he often wore patched garments. He would take his food, while sitting on the floor, and say, "I am only a servant, I eat like a servant or a slave eats, and I sit as any servant sits." He participated in the construction of the mosque in Medina with his followers. Similarly, he worked with his companions while digging the trench before the siege of Medina by the Allies in 5 B. Muslims today can seek inspiration from the events regarding the Prophet's quality of truthfulness. We are living in an age of advanced telecommunication devices where there is a flood of true and false information, events, and stories. Social media and the internet are used as effective tools to spread disinformation by some misguided groups or individuals. Many Muslims forward any information they receive through these to others without any investigation or verification by the scholarly people. They should remember this warning of the Prophet: "Whoever misleads is not of us. The conspirator and the deceiver are in hellfire." Forwarding any unauthentic reports to others is like cheating others conspiring against a peaceful society. Such acts may lead to tragic and disastrous consequences. So, Muslims should believe and preach information that is based on established facts. 5a. Describe the main difficulties faced by the early followers of Islam. 10. B. How can these events give hope to Muslims today? 4. A. The Prophet started his prophetic mission after 610 AD, and gradually the number of his fellows began to increase. Initially, the poor and the unsupported people embraced Islam, but slowly some well-off Makkans also became his followers. The Quraysh became furious on the growth of Islam. They targeted the poor Muslims and unleashed a campaign of inhuman persecutions that got intensified with the passage of time. Hazrat Bilal, the Negro slave, was tortured by his cruel master, Umayyah bin Khalaf. He used to tie hands of Hazrat Bilal and made him lie on the scorching desert sand with a heavy rock on his chest. He was pressed hard to abandon the new faith, but Hazrat Bilal remained unshaken. Another poor convert, Hazrat Amr bin Yasir, was also subjected to torture. He was made to lie on the burning sand and was beaten so mercilessly that he became unconscious. His parents were also humiliated. His mother, Sumayya, was killed in a painful way, while his father, Yasir, also died of prolonged sufferings. Hazrat Sohaib Rumi, a freed slave of Abdullah bin Judan, embraced Islam on the influence of Hazrat Amr bin Yasir. He too was tortured so much that he fell unconscious. Later, he tried to migrate to Medina, but the Quraysh asked him to give all his property to them, to which he consented. Hazrat Abu Fukaira, a slave of Safwan bin Umayyah, had embraced Islam with Hazrat Bilal. His master tied his legs with a rope and asked people to drag him away and make him lie on the burning sand. On the way, Safwan saw a dirty insect and asked Abu Fukaira to declare it his god, but he refused. Then he was strangulated so hard that the people thought he was surely dead. Hazrat Lubaina was a slave girl of Hazrat Umar. He used to beat her and stopped only when he was exhausted and would say, "I have stopped not out of pity but because I am tired." Hazrat Zanira was also a slave of Hazrat Umar's family and was often beaten very hard by him. She was blinded by torture inflicted by Abu Jahl. Hazrat Abu Dar, the seventh convert, announced his conversion in the Kaaba, and the Quraysh beat him so hard that he lay prostrate on the ground. Hazrat Zubair bin Al-Awwam, the fifth convert, used to be wrapped up in a burning mat by his uncle and was forced to inhale smoke. Hazrat Nadia and Hazrat Umais were also slaves who, patiently, suffered severest torture on their conversion to Islam. Hazrat Harith bin Abi Holla, a son of Hazrat Khadija from her previous husband, was also killed by the Makkans when he was trying to protect the Prophet against his enemies. Hazrat Ubaidah, one of the earliest converts, also faced many persecutions at the hands of the Quraysh. He, along with many others, was allowed in 615 AD by the Prophet to migrate to Abyssinia. This African state was under the rule of a kind and just Christian king, Najashi Negus. Other prominent Muslims who emigrated to Abyssinia were Hazrat Abd Rahman bin Auf, Hazrat Uthman bin Affan, Hazrat Jafar bin Abu Talib and Hazrat Zubair bin Al-Awwam. All these Muslims heaved a sigh of relief as they escaped from their Makkan persecutors. They continued to live there for some years, away from their homes. Some, like Hazrat Uthman, would come back to Mecca to make a greater emigration. Others would directly emigrate to Medina between 622 AD and 630 AD. It is to be noted that the Makkans did not spare even some of the rich people like Hazrat Talha, Hazrat Uthman, and Hazrat Abu Bakr. Hazrat Uthman was persecuted by his relatives, and Hazrat Abu Bakr was dragged along by his beard when he had rushed to rescue the Prophet from Makkan chiefs. Another early convert, Hazrat Kabab bin al-Arat, was tortured by branding his body with hot iron. Prominent Makkan chiefs who took the lead in persecutions were Abu Jahl, Abu Lahab, Abu Sufyan, Walid bin Mughira, Utbba, Shayba, and Sohail bin Amr. All of them, however, were unsuccessful in their mission. B. The response of the persecuted Muslims to the inhuman torture teaches many lessons to Muslims. They suffered for a noble cause and were finally successful. Muslims today should remember God and be steadfast in difficult situations. This may be done while finding it difficult to practice Islam openly in a non-Muslim state. In such situations, they should observe patience without feeling frustrated. They should reassure themselves that God is the ultimate source of help. The Quran mentions God's help as, and whoever relies on God, then he is sufficient for him. 65:3, Al-Talaq. Muslims should refer all their difficulties and miseries to God alone whenever they feel it impossible to find a way out. Such an attitude guarantees peace of mind and keeps hope alive. The Quran and Ahadith reiterate that establishing regular prayer is the most effective means of remembering God and attaining a state of tranquility.